As a youngster, Ellie has forever been interested about space science and radio transmissions. She can go through the entire evening at the radio, reaching various regions of the planet for no reason in particular, monitoring every one of her approaches a guide. Her dad generally upholds her, and they frequently check out at space along with a telescope. Ellie fantasies about reaching outsiders sometime in the not-so-distant future. However, in some cases she likewise contemplates whether she could likewise utilize a radio to speak with her dead mother. Years after the fact, Ellie is a specialist working for the Quest for Extra-Earthbound Knowledge program, or SETI, at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. Very much like during her life as a youngster, she goes through hours sitting at a radio looking for emanations sent by outsiders to demonstrate they're genuine. Her visually impaired collaborator Kent has regard for what she does in light of the fact that no one sits to simply listen any longer. Ellie begins another guide denoting every one of the spots in the universe she's as of now checked. One day while eating at an eatery, Ellie is drawn nearer by Palmer, who gets some information about the observatory's ongoing work. He's composing a book about what innovation means for underdeveloped nations and has a little plastic compass that he attempts to gift Ellie, however she gives it back. Palmer gets coquettish and they consent to meet on Tuesday. Before long, the president's science consultant David shows up to keep an eye on the exploration, yet it's unmistakable he would rather not be there. On Tuesday night, they set up a party and David continues to make sense of how science projects need to create gain since it's utilizing individuals' charges. Ellie attempts to make sense of the significance of logical examination and Palmer comes to her safeguard, just for David to refer to him as father. As Ellie's temperament drops, she inquires as to whether he's a cleric and he denies it, making sense that he got an expert in divinity and presently he accomplishes common compassionate work with the backing of third world holy places. Ellie is incredulous, yet she actually leaves with him and they watch the stars for some time so she can share a portion of the things she knows. She likewise recounts to him the narrative of how her father propelled him to turn into a cosmologist. The pair shares a kiss and winds up going through the night together. After they're finished, they have a philosophical discussion about God and science. Palmer really puts stock in God, however Ellie figures there should be a clarification for everything. Then, at that point, Palmer gets some information about her life as a youngster, learning her mom passed on during labor and her dad when she was 9. Ellie gets awkward and reports she should go to work, however she advises Palmer to leave his telephone number. On out, Ellie recollects the day her dad kicked the bucket. That evening she heard a commotion and went down the stairs to find the father fell. She needed to run back and get the medication from the higher-up restroom, yet it was past the point of no return. Later during the burial service, a minister clarified for her that it had been God's will, however Ellie conflicted. She assumed she simply ought to have been kept medication in the first floor restroom as well. A while later she overlooked the others and hurried to a radio to check whether she could reach her dad. In the present, Kent illuminates Ellie that David has closed down their venture. An enraged Ellie races to holler at David, who trusts she's burning through her time so he's saving her vocation. Then Ellie gets back and tracks down Palmer's number with the little compass. Anyway, she calls Kent, all things being equal, and declares she'll look for financial backers so their gathering can proceed with their exploration in New Mexico. At the point when she moves out, she abandons Palmer's number. After 13 months, after many bomb gatherings in different organizations, Ellie shows up at Haddon Businesses to put forth her defense, yet the board refers to her thoughts as sci-fi. Ellie snaps and tirades, bringing up all science revelations were sci-fi sooner or later ever. At that point the board gets a call from Chief Haddon himself, who consents to subsidize her examination. After 4 years, Ellie is still in New Mexico working with enormous satellite dishes. One evening Kent accompanies awful news, saying they're getting strain from established researchers to introduce results. Haddon will subsidize the venture for a really long time, but the telescopes are government claimed and they need to rent them to additional productive individuals. It's been concluded that the venture will be closed down in 90 days. Ellie needs to battle anyway. Kent believes now is the ideal time to concede rout. Meanwhile, Palmer has distributed his book and has turned into an otherworldly guide at the White House. He shows up on television and makes sense that he isn't hostile to innovation, however he accepts individuals have lost the way since they're fixated on PCs as opposed to tracking down significance throughout everyday life. Days pass and Ellie listens constantly. One night, she's stunned to hear a beating commotion. Getting extremely energized, she quickly calls her group to give them the directions while she surges back to the observatory. The group gets energized as well and starts interfacing however many machines as could be expected under the circumstances as they turn the satellites to get a superior sign. They cooperate to do all the following and recording, joyfully affirming it comes from space. It seems to come from the star Vega, 26 light-years away. This implies it's been going for north of 20 years. Out of nowhere the transmission stops and Ellie is going to lose trust, yet fortunately it before long restarts. Ellie understands the beats address indivisible numbers, and that implies it's not arbitrary and somebody explicitly sent it. After the group contends on the most proficient method to continue, they consent to call everybody. The following morning the region loads up with correspondence and public safety guides. The group makes sense of different stations have affirmed their disclosure, however Public Safety Board Pioneer Kids is as yet not glad that the group told the world as opposed to keeping the data ordered. Basically this time David guards her, making sense of that without the assistance of different stations they would have lost the sign. With Kent's help, they find a subsequent sign accompanying the first and they interface it to a television. The group begins playing with the settings, lastly figures out how to disentangle the signs into a video message. It's a recording of Hitler's initial discourse at the Olympics. This is the principal TV transmission that went into space and the outsiders have sent it back as a welcome. The White House panics and the president makes a declaration of the outsider contact while doing whatever it takes, also Hitler, guaranteeing journalists that the message is harmless. Ellie prepares to talk in broad daylight, but David is called as the head of the examination, all things being equal. In the interim Kent keeps on examining the sign and acknowledges it has structure. They set up every one of the additional casings that don't have a place with the Olympics video and find it converts into monstrous measures of information. Before long Ellie makes a show about this information and David reports the public authority will assume control over the unscrambling, making Ellie fight since this has forever been her confidential work. White House official Rachel permits Ellie to keep control of the examination, yet all progress should continuously be secretly talked about with the public authority first prior to disclosing any declarations. Before long media all around the world is discussing this disclosure. Neo-Nazi nonconformists assume control over the roads while strict participation is on the raise. Well-being associations are likewise stressed that mass self-erasure might turn into a major issue since certain factions have proactively begun to kick the bucket. As everybody on television begins contending science versus religion, a great many individuals camp external the office in New Mexico. Some are simply supplicating, others are watching, yet many are additionally dissenting. Ellie is stunned to see an obscure association is offering UFO snatching protection. The vast majority are having some good times, yet she stresses over a zealot named Joseph who continues to move disdain. 3 weeks after the disclosure, Ellie returns home to find an email from an obscure shipper. The text says, "Take me to your chief," and Ellie answers, "Who are you?" The response rapidly comes saying, "I have confidential," and showing part of the outsider message. As Ellie lashes out over a likely programmer, she gets a call and fax for an extraordinary arrangement. Minutes after the fact, a helicopter drops Ellie at the air terminal and she enters a confidential plane to meet Haddon, the one who supported her exploration and sent those messages. He lives in that plane and considers Ellie perhaps of his most significant venture, which is the reason he explored her. Haddon plays a video that sums up Ellie's life and accomplishments prior to uncovering he used to be a specialist as well, which is the reason he detests how the public authority and religion impede science. Then Haddon declares he's translated the information and plays it on the screen, showing it should be organized in 3 aspects to grasp it. The following day Ellie presents this revelation to the public authority, making sense of the information contains diagrams for a machine of some sort. Since they can't determine what the machine is for, a contention results to choose if building it or not, since it very well may be risky. The subject of God continues to come up and Ellie is stunned to see Palmer show up, saying they ought to track down a center point. The contention is interfered with by the appearance of the president, who listens to everybody. That evening a party is tossed to praise this advancement and numerous nonconformists accumulate outside, including Joseph. They request that researchers find a genuine line of work as opposed to squandering charged dollars. Ellie meets with Palmer and they have another philosophical conversation. She makes sense if she really wants confirmation of things and Palmer requests that she demonstrate she adored her dad, which leaves her astounded. At that point they're interfered with by huge news that's spilled on television. It's been found that the machine is a one-individual space apparatus. A crisis meeting is held at the White House and they consent to fabricate the machine, so the president will contact different countries to spread the gamble and cost. A choice board of trustees is shaped and Palmer is in it. They'll meet with a lot of contender to conclude who will go in the machine. To Ellie's shock, David leaves as science consultant so he can be a competitor as well. Before long media begins examining how much this entire venture will cost the nation and who is worth of making such an excursion. There's a great deal of contention encompassing the 10 last competitors since 33% are American and Japan doesn't chip in anybody in return for a frameworks reconciliation subcontract. Ellie shows up on television saying the explorer ought to comprehend the language of the message and that she doesn't figure the outsiders would send them something that doesn't work, so it ought not be risky. This doesn't stop the top space traveler on the rundown from pulling out his application when his frightened youngsters ask him to. Later Ellie meets with Palmer and clarifies that due for time enlargement, the individual will just burn through 4 years in the boat, however 50 years will have passed on the planet. She thinks the penance is worth the effort, assuming it implies tracking down such significant responses, and they wind up kissing once more. Upon the arrival of the competitor interviews, Ellie truly does unbelievably well and the council is prepared to wrap up. Anyway, Palmer slices in to get some information about her secularism, which makes her awful search before everybody. Eventually, David is the anointed one. At night, Palmer visits Ellie to make sense that he was unable to pick somebody who thinks most about the world is hallucinating, so a crying Ellie gives him back the compass and throws him out. The machine is worked at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, and swarms start gathering there as well. Heaps of testing is being finished utilizing a robot to recognize any incidental effects for the traveler. Upon the arrival of the send-off, Ellie goes to the occasion and David tells her he wishes her vision had been sufficient, yet tragically the world sudden spikes in demand for a benefit framework. Then Ellie joins the group in the control room and watches in fervor how the shuttle is enacted, its rings pivoting around it as a gas pedal of some kind. While the last tests are run, Ellie takes a gander at the screen and notification Yaspe professing to be a specialist close to the boat. She promptly cautions David and everybody rushes to handle Joseph down, yet it's past the point of no return. He initiates a bomb and a colossal blast cuts down the pinnacle. As the group frenzies and runs, the falling parts obliterate the boat and kill a lot of laborers, including David. Some garbage takes off yet no one gets injured external the boat region. In a little while, the specialists hold a legitimate memorial service for the fallen ones while the news show the farewell video left by Joseph, in which he said he thoroughly took care of the decency of humankind. At the point when Ellie gets back, she finds a few machines sitting tight for her in her room. She presses a key and a video call begins, uncovering Haddon in the Mir space station. He's living there since he's perishing of disease and needs to triumph when it's all said and done his last days in space. He focuses in on a camera in Hokkaido Island, amazing Ellie with a subsequent boat worked by Japan. The organization that got the agreement is an auxiliary of Haddon's and did this stealthily. Ellie quickly goes to Japan in Haddon's confidential plane and meets the group in a major boat. They help her all she has to be familiar with the excursion and offer the security precautionary measures, including a compartment of toxic substance. They've given this to space explorers for a really long time in the event that they need to self-erase in light of the fact that they could get stuck drifting in space after a boat disappointment. At night, Palmer visits Ellie and gives her the compass, admitting he really didn't decide in favor of her since he would have rather not lost her. Before long the media is declaring there's a subsequent machine, yet no correspondents are permitted on the site. On send-off day, Ellie gets anxious when she sees every one of the rings turning, yet she progresses at any rate. The experts make every one of the associations with her suit and put a camera on her head so the entire excursion gets recorded. Palmer utilizes his contacts to get Kent so he can give Ellie a best of luck message before takeoff. The boat starts vibrating, which is typical, yet Ellie likewise sees an odd light. She takes a stab at recording it for the group, however the recording is all static. She guesses it should be some electromagnetic field and is stunned to see the boat becoming straightforward. The commencement starts and the group is concerned, particularly when the boat begins sparkling and every one of the numbers on the PCs are untouchable. They consider cutting short the mission, but Ken hears Ellie's voice through the static swearing she's all set. The ocean begins going off the deep end nearby and shakes the boat just before the shuttle at long last takes off. Ellie is flabbergasted by the lights that encompass her, which rapidly transform into the most astonishing and wonderful divine perspectives. This before long transforms into a passage and Ellie guesses it's a wormhole, depicting the entire experience for the camera despite the fact that she can't speak with ground control any longer. Subsequent to crossing what seems, by all accounts, to be remaining radiation, the boat stops and Ellie sees Vega. Glancing around uncovers a strange contraption close by, just for the boat to unexpectedly take off once more. Presently Ellie flies through a progression of wormholes, which continues to unusually affect her face. Ultimately it stops at one more star framework and Ellie sees a city on a planet. She scarcely will see something else before the boat enters a substantially more brutal wormhole and the compass begins drifting, so Ellie passes on the seat to get it. At that point the seat mouths off and raises a ruckus around town before the lights go out. Ellie turns on her electric lamp and finds a divine occasion she can't distinguish. She's unimaginably moved by its excellence and says a writer ought to have been shipped off to depict it. Unexpectedly she regards herself as drifting down and she shows up on an ocean side. This spot is likewise gorgeous and seems to be a drawing she made as a youngster. Looking around makes her hands meet opposition, meaning this so an energy or deception of some sort. At that point a figure begins running toward her and Ellie is stunned to see her dad, however when she embraces him she understands he isn't genuine. This is an outsider, who makes sense that he took this structure to handily speak with her more. He affirms there are many extraterrestrial societies out there and that people reach the universe first with their radio transmissions. The movement framework Ellie utilized wasn't worked by his kin, it was made by an obscure element. The outsiders watched people and concurred they were commendable, so they sent them the outlines as an initial step for humankind to join the remainder of the universe. After he bids farewell, Ellie watches a delightful meteor shower show up overhead. A light out of nowhere sparkles too brilliantly and Ellie ends up back in the boat, which is arriving back in the Japanese Ocean. The group frenzies and contacts Ellie, saying there was a glitch and the boat won't ever leave. After Ellie is protected, she shares her entire experience, yet the camera just recorded static. She swears it's all obvious, but Kids shows her a recording of the boat falling in a moment or two. The following day the president gives a discourse saying this is just a stumble, yet soon different countries are getting into lawful questions. The media is loaded with analysis and paranoid fears, particularly when Kits ventures down from his guide position. Subsequently, a legislative panel drove by Kits grills Ellie, who brings up a wormhole can make sense of what occurred. Time enlargement might have made 1 second on Earth equivalent 18 hours out in space. Kits quickly calls her out on the grounds that wormholes are only a hypothesis and drops a major bomb. Haddon has passed on and it's accepted this entire arrangement had been a trick coordinated by him. Ellie cries as she asks individuals to accept her story, stunning herself by mentioning them to have confidence since she has no proof. Her discourse about stunningness, modesty, and trust motivates Palmer. However, the board closes her story is likewise a scam. On out, Palmer joins Ellie before the cameras and an immense group, telling the world he trusts her. In the meantime, covertly Rachel tells Kits that Ellie's camera recorded 18 hours of static. After 18 months, Ellie is working at another base with additional radars since now SETI has sufficient subsidizing to continue onward. Kids visit the base during school trips and Ellie shows them they should look for their own responses.